Over my decade of playing Ark, I've beaten every single boss on alpha difficulty multiple times. In this video, I'll cover the best ways to both cheese and regularly approach every single boss fight Ark has ever released, as well as covering literally everything you could possibly want to know about the stats, abilities, arena, and the creature summons in every boss fight. There's chapters below for every map so you can skip around to what you care about, but there's a ton of good information throughout the video, so if you're just trying to learn about boss fights, this whole video is pretty useful. These sort of guide videos take forever to make. I've been working on this for like 3 weeks already, so if you do enjoy this sort of content, I'd really appreciate a sub. Without further ado, let's get into the island. The Broodmother is up first, and you can see the summon requirements for both the tributes and the artifacts on screen now for all 3 difficulties. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 30 or higher. To fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 50 or higher. And to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 70 or higher. The Broodmother is an arena boss fight, and the only real weaknesses from the arena come from there being water in the arena and there being a cheese spot. In case you weren't aware, the reason that I'm mentioning the arena thing is that during arena fights, you can only bring 20 creatures and up to 10 players. There's a timer on the fight, and you can't bring flyers into the arena, so it does affect how the fight goes pretty drastically. It also transports you to a separate location, and if you die during the fight, all your stuff is gone because all the stuff in the arena basically disappears. In terms of stats, on Gamma, the Broodmother has 324,000 HP, on Beta, the Broodmother has 648,000 HP, and on Alpha, it has 972,000 HP. In terms of mini summons, the Broodmother summons Astraeos, and for abilities, it has an Acid Poison Spit, a Web Spit, and a really high damaging regular attack. This boss might have the most well-known cheese strat in the entirety of Ark, but all you have to do is go into the boss with a really good shotgun and a Procoptodon. If you have multiple players, you're going to need 1 Procoptodon for every 2 players. 1 person can go in the pouch, and 1 person can go on the back of every Procoptodon. I don't recommend every single player bringing a Procoptodon, even though it is a decent idea. There's just not that much room on the mushroom, so it can be a kind of tight fit. All you need to do to choose the boss is get into the arena with a Procoptodon, get on the back of the Procoptodon, and jump up onto this mushroom right here. Once you get here, you dismount it, or if you're in the pouch, you can even just stay in the Procoptodon, and you shoot down on the boss with a shotgun. It cannot physically reach you with any attack. You can kill this boss extremely easily on lower difficulties if you have a decent shotgun. And if you're on a higher difficulty, generally 2 players or just a really good shotgun is enough. This is one of the easiest cheese strats in the game, and it is pretty worth doing because you can get a lot of good tech engrams really early in progression. The jump can be a bit tricky to do the first time, but once you get it, it's really easy to repeat. In terms of the best normal strats for this fight, the Megatherium's a really obvious choice because it gets the insect killer buff from killing the Astraeos, which makes them incredibly strong. You could also go with Spinos to get the hydrated buff from the water. This also works really well. I don't like Spinos that much for boss fights, but for this fight, they definitely work. The reason I don't like Spinos generally is because the AI on the ones that you're not riding will tend to use the not as high damaging attack, which is when it's on its 4-legged stance. This just really tanks how much damage per second you're outputting on the Spinos, which is why I think Rexes are just generally better than Spinos for fights because they only have 1 attack and they have similar stats to Spinos. So the Rex basically does as much as the Spino would be doing if it used its better attack the entire time. So the Spino overall just doesn't do as much damage because it doesn't always use the better attack. Building off that point, obviously I also recommend a basic Rex or Dinopithecus army. Those both work perfectly fine. If you're using a Spino, Rex, or Dinopithecus army for the Broodmother fight, bring a Yutyrannus with you. It buffs the army extremely well. And if you're using Megatheriums, bring a Daedon instead. The reason you don't want to bring a Yutyrannus for the Megatheriums is because the Yutyrannus has a higher drag weight than the Megatheriums. So throughout that entire fight, the Broodmother will be targeting the Yutyrannus, and there's no reason for that hassle when the Megatheriums already crushed the boss. The Daedon's healing is not as good as the Yutyrannus buff roar, but it's more than enough for this fight, and it doesn't have as high of a drag weight as the Megatherium, so the boss won't target you. This fight is relatively difficult because the stats are pretty high, but if you're ready for it before you go in, it's really nothing difficult. One more thing I should mention about this boss fight is the arena is really hot, so make sure to bring a decent amount of water and med brews to heal yourself back up. Up next is the Megapithecus, and you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of the fight on screen now. To fight it on Gamma, you have to be level 45 or higher. To fight it on Beta, you have to be level 65. And to fight it on Alpha, you have to be level 85. The Megapithecus also has an arena. On Gamma, it has 180,000 HP. On Beta, it has 396,000 HP. And on Alpha difficulty, it has 540,000 HP. The mini spawns for this fight are the Gigantopithecus and the Mesopithecus, which are the normal and the small monkey. And in terms of the arena, the only real thing of note here is that it's really cold. And there's a giant pit on the bridge, which you really want to avoid at all costs. The only ability of note here is the rock throw ability, which is pretty well known by everybody that's fought this boss before. You basically just don't want to get hit by this rock throw. It doesn't generally kill you off the back of a mount, but it does have a chance to do that. They tried to patch that out of the game a million times, but it still does kill you sometimes. So the solution is simply sitting back on a Uranus, roaring any army with decent stats, and just fighting the boss anywhere besides right next to the pit. I generally do it right at the bottom of the staircase or right where you spawn in when you start the boss fight. The way you want to do this is you basically shoot the boss with any projectile, drag it over to you, and then either bring your army to where you're standing at the bottom of the staircase, or bring the Megapithecus all the way back to where your creature spawned in. Both of these spots are good. I recommend something like a Rex army. You could use Dinopithecus if you're an Ark Ascended. Therazinos work, Allos work, Dinotherium work. Pretty much any boss fighting army in the game can kill this. The stats are really low, and there's pretty much nothing you have to worry about. The boss does deal knockback, which is why you want to avoid that pit, but besides that, there's no real concerns. There is a cheese strat for this boss where you use a Percoptodon again and jump up to the top of the arena, but I personally do not recommend this. The boss is really easy, so it's not even really worth your time to cheese it, and you can die when you cheese it because the rocks can sometimes kill you when you're up there. Just fight this boss the regular way, it's really not hard. Up next is the dragon, and you can see the summon requirements on screen for all 3 tiers of the difficulty now. In terms of level requirements, you have to be level 55 or higher to fight it on Gamma, 75 or higher for Beta, and level 100 for Alpha. In terms of stats, it has 432,000 HP on Gamma, 864,000 HP on Beta, and 972,000 HP on Alpha. There is a huge jump between Gamma and Beta here. The dragon has 2 phases, its flying phase and its landed phase. When it's flying, it shoots RPG-like fire projectiles down on you, and it summons Pteranodons and Dimorphodons. You can shotgun the boss while it's flying around, just make sure not to get hit by the fireballs, they do hurt. Also, be careful of the Dimorphs because those can damage you off the back of your mount, which is a big issue for boss fights that I'll talk about a lot throughout this video. Anything that can kill you off the back of your mount needs to be a top priority to either avoid or take out, because if you die, it doesn't matter how strong your creatures are, they're all going to die because you died in the arena and they're not going to come back. While it's landed, it shoots fire breath that deals a % damage to carnivores and just does a ton of damage in general. It also has basic attacks. You're either going to want to use carnivores with the new extinguisher grenades or extremely strong and high damaging carnivores to take out the boss fast before you die to the % damage they take, or you can just use herbivores, which is much easier for this fight. Something like a Therizino or a Dinotherium is a really good choice here. These don't take that % damage I was just talking about, and that makes the fight a ton easier, especially when you can put veggie cakes on herbivores, which gives them so much extra tankiness. While it's flying in the air, you basically want to prioritize killing all the mini spawns. Yet again, those are Pteranodons and Dimorphodons, just because you don't want to have to deal with that while the creature's landed and you're trying to get most of your DPS down on the boss. For cheese strats, there is 2 that I can mention. First is kind of a mini cheese strat. If you're on a Megalosaurus, you can actually jump below the dragon and it can't hit you because the fire and basic attacks it does go out in front of the dragon. So if you're under it, you can actually just not take damage. This tech is pretty good to pair with a really good shotgun, and you can use stuff like Therazinos or other tanky creatures to attack the boss while this is happening. As long as the dragon stays still and you stay under it, you're totally safe and you get free DPS on the boss. Another good cheese strat is if you can transfer over Deinonychus, I highly recommend it. Deinonychus for this fight are ridiculously good. The way you basically use them is you go up to the boss, get a couple of Deinonychus onto its back legs, and then just stay there. The dragon, yet again, can't hit you if you're under it. So if you have an army attacking the boss while your Deinonychus are under it, it's going to take a ton of bleed damage, and this boss cannot deal with that. The Deinonychus is pretty much always a good pick if it's able to hit the boss because bleed damage on a boss is really valuable. But for the dragon especially, it is so good. In terms of the best normal strats, I highly recommend a Theri with Uranus army. This is really basic, and it's easily the best normal choice for fighting the boss. If you want to get a bit more fancy and you're an Ark Ascended, using the Extinguisher Grenade with Dinopithecus, Rexes, or other carnivore armies works totally fine. Other creatures like the Dinotherium, like I mentioned earlier, are really strong herbivores too that are great for bosses, and every herbivore in the game gets healed with veggie cakes, which is super good for bosses. They heal so much. One more thing I should mention before moving on, you want to avoid all the lava in the arena. When you spawn in, just stay on that little island. The dragon will land and come to you. You don't need to go to it. And secondarily, this arena is incredibly hot, so you will just pass out and die if you don't have med brews and a ton of water. Another thing I highly recommend for this fight is you can bring Kalian soup. What this does is it basically keeps you from burning too much. Very valuable for this arena especially. You can see the recipe for Kalian soup on screen now. It's really not too difficult to make in a cooking pot or industrial cooker. The reason I suggest bringing Kalian soup for this boss and not, for example, Freya curry for the Megapithecus boss, which has a really cold arena, is because flak generally heats you up. So if you're in a colder arena, the flak can balance out for that with med brews. but if you're in a hot arena, you really can't do much about it because you do want to have good armor on you. This boss is tough, just be careful and make sure not to touch the lava, that hurts. Up next is the Overseer, but this boss is two totally different phases. First, let's talk about the Tek Cave, and then we can get into the Overseer fight afterwards. To get into the Tek Cave, you just need the trophies for the difficulties for all three previous bosses. So for the Gamma difficulty, you need the Gamma Dragon, Megapithecus, and Broodmother trophy, and then so on for the Beta and Alpha difficulties. The Tek Cave is a steep descent down inside of a volcano, where there's incredibly high level creatures of many different varieties trying to kill you as you need to get down to the bottom, because you can only fight the Overseer after beating the Tek Cave. There's a lot of really high level creature threats in here that do a ton of damage and have crazy stats, but if you have a strong army of creatures or you get a Karka in here, which I'll show you how to do in a moment, these creatures are not threats to you. To get the Karka in the Tek Cave, bear with me now, you need to walk in. The Karka can fit in the cave. It's a very tight squeeze, but it does fit. Just so you know though, if you go in with a Karka, you're going to want to have a cryopod on you so you can cryo it at the end of the Tek Cave, because you cannot transfer it to the Overseer fight. In terms of getting the rest of your creatures in the cave, this can be a bit tricky. First of all, you can place rafts on the lava, which makes it a lot easier. And what I recommend doing is having 2 creatures at a time in rows. So basically you will have like 8 rows of Therazinos or Rexes in pairs of 2. Put your Yutyrannus way in the back to keep it safe. And you just have every row of these Rexes or Theres following the row in front of it. So they basically all go single file. I'll talk about army construction later in the section, but this is basically how you get any army in the cave. The main threats in here if you're on foot are the Yutyrannus and the Prolovias. The other challenge in this cave is that the Tek Cave itself is extremely hot. There's lava in the middle, so if you get knocked off, you are really screwed. You also need to be careful of creatures that are following you. For example, if your boss army is following you as you're running through it on a Karka or a couple of Rexes, there's a serious risk of some of your creatures just walking off the cliff into the lava, or getting fear roared by a Yutyrannus in the cave and then jumping in the lava. In my opinion, if you're using creatures from the island, the only 2 options that are really good for this are Rexes and Theres. The reason I choose these 2 is because they combine speed and power. Something like a Dinopithecus in Ark Ascended is an incredibly strong creature, but getting 18 of those through a cave is devastatingly annoying. They travel super slowly, and even though they're super strong, even if you get them through, fighting the Overseer with Dinopithecus is also really annoying, which I'll talk about in a second. So yeah, bring Rexes or Theres. If you're bringing Theres, be careful because the Yutyrannus can fear roar them, so you really need to either shoot them with a long neck before the Yutyrannus can get close enough to roar, or run ahead with your Karka or your couple of Rexes that you're clearing the cave with to just maul through all the Utis before they can roar you. So basically what you want your breakdown to be is either bring about 3 Rexes to run ahead of your Therazino army and then have a Yutyrannus in the back and then just clear the cave with the Rexes, or just bring in a Karka, bring 18 Therazinos or Rexes behind you yet again, and then have a Yutyrannus way in the back. Regardless of what you're doing, you want a couple of Rexes or the Karka way in front of the rest of your army. You don't want Therazinos attacking a Yuti. If the Yuti fear roars them, you are done. In terms of countering the Prolovia, use rare flowers. If you have a rare flower consumed, Prolovia simply cannot dismount you regardless of what you're riding. It's an incredibly useful thing that nowhere near enough people know about. In my opinion, your best bet is just bringing a lot of med brews to heal yourself back up, and then just pair those med brews with Shadow Stake because they give you both hypo and hyperthermic insulation, which is incredibly useful. The last way you can do the Tek Cave is just hard cheesing it. There's a couple ways you can cheese it. You can use an Archaeopteryx to glide down through the cave. You can use a Mailing or a Meguana to just completely crush the cave and just glide straight down. Or you can just use a Cinemacrops. There's a lot of ways to cheese the cave. You can definitely glide down through it. It's not that hard. Now that you've gotten through the Tek Cave, let's talk about the Overseer. The Overseer is actually a lot easier than the Tek Cave in my opinion. There's a lot less going on with it, but it is still pretty tough. Its HP pools are pretty deceptive because there's multiple HP bars for this boss, but the Gamma difficulty is 63,360 HP, the Beta version is 132,480 HP, and the Alpha version is 207,360 HP. The reason the HP seems really low is because there's a couple of things that make it a lot tankier than it looks. First of all, it has a really high defense stat, so you do less damage to it than other bosses. Second of all, it darts around the arena incredibly quickly, so it is pretty difficult to get damage on the boss sometimes, because if it darts across a huge arena, there's multiple seconds of you just chasing it down with relatively fast creatures, where you're getting shot at by drones, attacked by defense units, lasers are getting shot at you that can stun you. It really can wear you down if you're not ready for it. And thirdly, throughout the entire fight, it transfers into the Dragon, Megapithecus, and Broodmother forms, which are basically separate HP bars where you have to go kill that boss and then it goes back to the main Overseer HP afterwards, so it's way tankier than it looks. I've pretty much covered the abilities when I just talked about it. It turns into the Broodmother, Megapithecus, and Dragon, it summons scouts and defense units to attack you, and it has multiple lasers it shoots out that can stun you, and it goes around the arena that's a massive arena really quickly. If you're fighting this boss legitimately, you have to use fast creatures. Stuff like Dinopithecus are just not going to work here because they're so slow it takes forever to chase the boss down. The other issue with Dinopithecus is that they have a pretty wide hitbox, so it's really hard to get a lot of them to attack the boss at one time. Also, being slow means there's a lot more time for the scouts to shoot you, and they do splash damage, so they can damage you while you're on the back of a mount. Make sure you have med brews, and even a spare set of armor is not a bad idea here. In terms of bringing extra support units for your normal strat, you could bring a Uranus to buff all your Theres or Rexes, but it's really not even that necessary for this fight. I find that just riding along with a Theria or a Rex with the rest of your army is super effective in this fight. The reason is there's a lot of the fight where you're simply chasing the boss around, trying to avoid lasers and dodging stuff. So riding on a creature like a Therizino that has a more narrow hitbox makes it really easy to avoid the lasers by just getting behind one of these giant pillars. And you really don't spend as much time sitting around the boss and hitting it compared to other bosses, so the Uranus value is a little bit lower here compared to other fights. I also recommend shotgunning down scouts whenever you have time. For example, if you're chasing down the Overseer after it moved across the arena, while you're running over there, just shoot the scouts that are in the air. They get free DPS on your army the entire fight, and even if you have veggie cakes that are healing Therizinos, this does stack up if you don't just shoot the scouts out of the air. They're really not very tanky, so it's pretty easy to kill them if you shoot them, and worthwhile. Luckily for you though, fighting the boss with Therizinos or Rexes is actually only one of the methods that you could use. You can also cheese the boss with a Tek chestplate. All you have to do is fly up to the back of the arena, and you can go onto this ledge right here. When you go to this ledge, the only thing in this arena that can attack you are the flying scouts that have laser attacks, so as long as you kill those scouts, all you need is a really good shotgun, and you can just shoot down the boss. If you don't want to sit up here, you can also bring a lot of element and simply fly around on the top of the arena the entire fight. This is also an option, but the problem is it does take a while to kill the boss, so this does use a lot of element. One more thing I should definitely note here is that the timer on top of your screen is only relevant to the Tek Cave. There's no timer for the Overseer portion, so there's no worries there in terms of time failing. Overall, the Overseer and the Tek Cave combined is easily a top 3 boss in terms of difficulty in the game in my opinion, but hopefully this guide helped. Up next is the Manticore, and you can see the requirements to summon all 3 tiers of the boss on screen now. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 55, to fight it on Beta, you have to be level 70, and to fight it on Alpha, you have to be level 95. The Manticore is 100k HP on Gamma, 130k HP on Beta, and 160k HP on Alpha, so it's really not that much tougher on Alpha compared to Gamma. The mini spawns for this fight are the Rock Golem and the Death Worm, which are pretty tough, and its abilities include a basic swipe, a quill attack, a poison sting, and a poison ball, all of which inflicts torpor besides the basic swing. There's only one cheese strat for this boss that I know of that's extremely effective. If you have the Velonosaur, you're in luck. Literally all you have to do to beat this boss is bring one Velonosaur to the arena, and then just bring one soaker of any variety. It could be a Carbonemus, a Stego, or any other soaker. The Stego and the Carbonemus are the best for it because they do have an extra resistance on their back, which is where the Death Worms and the Rock Golems hit from, but other soakers can absolutely work. Like I said before, the HP for the Manticore is incredibly low. The gimmick for this is that it flies around a lot of the time and it can deal a lot of torpor, but the boss is extremely easy. So if you have one really high damaging Velonosaur and you just stay on the ledge where you started the fight at when it summons you in, and then you just send down your soaker into the middle of the pit down in the middle of the arena to tank all the Rock Golems and the Death Worms, you can focus all your energy with the Velonosaur on just shooting down the boss. The mini summons of the Rock Golems and the Death Worms simply don't go where you spawn in, so if you keep your Velonosaur up there, you're totally safe from them. The reason you send the soaker down is because if they're stuck on the soaker, they won't move up to where you are because they're trying to kill the soaker. The soakers also have higher drag weight than the Velonosaur, which is extremely useful as well. Yet again, drag weight is how bosses and the mini spawns for the bosses dictate what creature to target during the fight. This is obviously easier with more players, but in my old playthroughs, I used to 1v1 the Manticore with a Velonosaur, and it was incredibly easy. If you're fighting this boss with normal strats, any high tier static creature works extremely easily. All you need to do is kill all the minis when they spawn in, and just focus the boss whenever it goes to the ground. It has a flying phase and a landed phase. When it's flying around, try not to get hit with too much torpor stuff, but even if you do, it's really not going to knock you out. If you're on a Uranus, especially to roar the rest of your army, Uranus have really fast torpor drop, so you're basically in zero danger there. If you want to bring something like a shotgun to shoot down the boss while it's flying around, that's also not a bad idea, but it's not even necessary because the boss is so easy to kill. You are allowed to bring flyers into the arena as well. If you bring lightning wyverns or fire wyverns that are pretty strong, or even just a really strong pack of Argies, you can just beat the boss with those as well. In my opinion, the Velonosaur strat is the best strat if you can do it, and if you can't do it, just bring a basic Rex army and easily maul through the boss. The arena is pretty hot, so you could bring Gilly if you want. The only thing that you may want to bring is stimulants, but you really don't even need those. One more thing with the Manticore before I move on, do not bring shoulder mounts into the Manticore arena. You really don't want to bring shoulder mounts into any boss fight because it takes up a creature slot and it's basically a waste. But especially in the Manticore fight, absolutely avoid this. Using a shoulder mount against the Manticore in any boss arena that it's in basically glitches it out and doesn't let it land on the ground. This makes it way harder to kill because then you have to shoot it down out of the air with a shotgun or a Volanosaur. Up next is the Center's boss fight, which is the Broodmother and the Megapithecus Arena. This boss is fightable at level 70 on Gamma, 80 on Beta, and 90 on Alpha. And you can see the requirements for both tributes and artifacts for all 3 difficulties of the boss on screen now. This boss fight is essentially just a way weaker version of both the Megapithecus and the Broodmother thrown into one arena. They both have the same ability sets as I described earlier. They both summon the same creatures as I described earlier. They literally just have worse stats, their abilities do less damage, and the arenas are bigger and a little bit different. In Ark Evolved, there's not really that much you can take advantage of in this arena. For Ark Survival Ascended, however, there is water through the entire bottom of the arena, so you can use Spinos to get the Hydrated buff, and it's extremely strong. In Ark Evolved, you have to climb up on the side of this hill and gradually work your way across this wall. Once you're at the other side of the wall from where you started, you parachute over to the next set of buildings and continue to this corner. This strat literally just requires one parachute, a decent amount of parkour, and a good shotgun. You can't get hit by the Megapithecus here. There's other spots people have said to use for this boss fight in the past. In my opinion, this is the most consistent for not dying to the Megapithecus rock throws, and it's also really easy to set up. Yet again though, for these bosses, the strats to beat them are so easy. You can bring a couple of Megatheriums that are pretty strong and you'll wreck them, because you still get the insect killer buff by the Astraeos getting spawned. You can bring Spinos to get the Hydrated buff, Rexes, Dinosuchus, Dinotherium, Therazinos, Aulos. You could even use Carnos and it would wreck this boss. It's literally the easiest final boss of any map in the game. So unless you're in a PvP wipe and it literally just started and you want to get tech engrams, just breed a couple of strong creatures and wreck this boss fight. P.S. The old arena for this boss looked way cooler than the new one. I don't know why they changed it. The old one was really cool aesthetically and really unique, and the new one is super boring. Up next is Rockwell, and you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of the boss on screen now. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 60, to fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 75, and to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 100. The Gamma difficulty has 42 KHP, the Beta difficulty has 68.5 KHP, and the Alpha difficulty has 115 KHP. All difficulty tiers summon 8 tentacles for every phase, which also scale exponentially in HP just like the boss does. You have to kill tentacles to open Rockwell's heart so you could do damage to the main boss and chip away at that main HP I listed off numbers for. The heart stays open for a short amount of time after you kill all the tentacles, so it's basically a damage rush for this entire fight. The mini spawns for this fight are Nameless and Reapers. The abilities of the Rockwell is that it has a tentacle slam, an electric current that it can pulse out, and purple energy balls. This boss can be really tough, but there is one way to make it pretty much impossible to lose. Cactus Broth. Cactus Broth basically makes it so if creatures aren't super close to you, they ignore you. And on this boss fight specifically, the intention is to run around the boss in circles, really close to the tentacles and just shoot them as you're going around. And then after you shoot the 8, you need to go to this bridge and shoot the main heart. The reason Cactus Broth is so good here is because if you have Cactus Broth enabled, there's basically no way you're going to get targeted by any of the Reapers of the Nameless, which are easily the most dangerous threats in this boss fight. The only place that Reapers and Nameless spawn in this arena are on the outer ring, farther away from the boss, so they're never going to spawn in and get way too close to you, so with Cactus Broth, they'll never see you, and you'll never have to deal with any of those threats. There's 2 ways to get Cactus Broth on Aberration. First, you can just transfer it over from other maps. This is way easier than any other method. The second option is to go to the back of the Glowtail Cave, and when you go down here and go behind this one rock, there's a drop hidden behind this wall. This drop gives you Scorched Earth items, and sometimes it can give you Thorny Dragon saddles. Once you get the Thorny Dragon saddle, go to an industrial grinder, grind it down, and you'll get cactus sap after 2 grind downs. This is really valuable because there's no naturally spawning cactus on Aberration, so it's the only way to get the best item for the boss fight. With how to get Cactus Broth and why it's so good out of the way, let's get into actually how you beat the fight. Like I said before, you have to do 2 phases. You have to kill tentacles and then you have to damage the heart. On Gamma or Beta difficulty, you can go in by yourself, 1 good shotgun, really good amount of ammo, and you'll be able to kill this boss pretty easily by yourself. With that being said, I think the Gamma and the Beta difficulty specifically are easy, and Alpha is easy as well, but it's not easy if you're a solo player. The reason it's tough on Alpha is because there's a timer in the fight, and it's really hard to get the damage required to beat this boss fight, even if you're optimally going around the entire arena, and making sure that all of your circles around the arena end with you right next to the heart so you have the maximum amount of time to attack the heart. It's still pretty difficult to kill this boss in time. This applies for both if you're running around on foot or if you have tames, but I really don't think this boss fight is super advisable to do solo on Alpha. The best thing I can suggest to you is simply to optimally run around the entire map, be pretty aggressive in how you're playing, don't really be worried about anything. For example, if you have a bunch of Megalos in the arena and you're running around on a Rock Drake trying to shoot the boss, Don't spend time helping your Megalos kill the Reapers. Focus fully on killing everything the Rockwell has, its tentacles, its heart. That's what your priority needs to be. If you have good Megalos, they'll have no problem holding off the Reapers long enough for you to crush this boss. Other consumables to increase your speed, for example Focal Chili, are a really good idea to bring here for sure, but I definitely recommend having a buddy hop on with you to attempt this boss if you have one available to you. In terms of more normal strats where you're not just running around on foot with a shotgun, you can bring in rock drakes and use shotguns on the back of them to destroy the tentacles really quickly. They move around the map super fast, which is great. Using rock drakes in combination with another strong creature is generally the most common strategy I see online for this, and for good reason. It's a really effective strategy. You're safe on the back of the rock drake, you can get around the boss arena really quickly to damage the boss, and rock drakes are really strong in their own right, so you're not going to have any concerns with getting attacked by anything. This strategy also doesn't require cactus broth, which is really annoying to get on this map. I will say this strategy is probably also better if you just have one player. The reason I suggest going on foot most of the time is because I usually play it with a buddy. So when I'm going into the boss with a buddy, we'll just both grab a couple of cactus broth each because they last 10 minutes a pop, and then go crush the boss on foot because it's really easy to do, especially in the early game when you have pretty good shotguns. But if you're a solo player, the rock drake gets around the map faster. You also have a little bit more safety with the other parts of your army taking on the Reapers and the Nameless, so you can focus on the boss. So this is probably, in totality, the best method for this fight. You could also go in on a bunch of stegos and just have them tank everything in the arena while you go around and kill the boss. This works as well, but it's not as effective from my experience. I also recommend bringing a light pet, but make sure it stays on your shoulder. If you accidentally throw it off your shoulder, it will aggro all the Reapers and the Nameless to you. I also recommend bringing a light pet just to make sure that nothing spawns directly on top of you. One more thing you definitely can do if you want is bringing an assault rifle into this fight. I really don't like the assault rifle as a weapon, but the one use case I do like for it in the entire game is shooting those purple orbs. It makes it a lot easier to just not take the damage from them because the assault rifle has so many bullets and they are a one-shot kill when the assault rifle hits them. The purple orbs are kind of a threat because they do splash damage. If it hits you, they're going to damage your light pet, and light pets are not known for being super tanky, so they will die really quickly if you're not careful. So definitely make sure these don't hit you as you're going through the fight. If you're on a rock drake or you have a really high movement speed character, in terms of the other abilities, the shockwave is not really a big deal at all. It's really easy to avoid. If they do hit you though, it will stun you and dismount you, so really do avoid these. It does not feel good to get hit with an electric stun here. And the tentacles slam directly in front of where they're facing, so don't just go right in front of where the tentacles are and they will not hit you. You also shouldn't be right next to where they're going to slam because then the shockwave will just hit you and that really sucks like I just said. Basically keep a bit of a distance, but don't be too far away where you're getting damage drop off. Overall, this fight's really not bad, and it gets exponentially easier even if you just have one extra player with you, so I do recommend that, but yet again, you can do this solo. Just make sure you have a good shotgun, and regardless of how you tackle the boss fight solo, it's gonna be a bit of a time crunch. The arena is also a bit cold, but the temperature is pretty medium. If you have a flak set on, you're really not gonna have to worry about temperature at all. Moving on to Ragnarok now, let's first talk about the Manticore and Dragon arena that was in Ark Survival Evolved, and then we can move on to Nunatak afterwards, which is the Ark Survival Ascended boss fight. The Manticore and Dragon boss fight arena is one of the easiest boss fights in the game. There's not any cheese strat that I know of for it, but let's get into all the numbers. First of all, you can see on screen now what you need to summon it for all 3 tiers of difficulty. And to fight it on Gamma, you have to be level 70, to fight it on Beta, you have to be level 80, and to fight it on Alpha, you have to be level 90. Honestly, getting all these artifacts is significantly harder than the boss fight. In terms of stats, similar to the center, these are just weaker versions of the Dragon and the Manticore, and they are substantially weaker in terms of all stats and ability damage. The mini spawns for these bosses are also nerfed, so the Manticore doesn't spawn death worms anymore and only spawns rock golems. Instead of spawning death worms now, the Manticore spawns griffins, which I think is a lot easier. The reason for this is because the death worms can impair you as you're running around on the floor because they just get up in your way. Griffins fly around, they do a decent amount of damage and have okay stats, but they're nowhere near as strong as death worms, and they're definitely less in your way. The Dragon still spawns Pteranodons and Dimorphodons, but is also a lot weaker. In terms of abilities, they have the same abilities as I discussed earlier in the video. Carnivores do still get burned pretty badly, and Ark Evolved doesn't have any extinguisher grenades, so I do recommend just bringing herbivores for this fight. You do not need super strong herbivores at all, so it's a lot easier than getting a pretty strong carnivore line. Yet again, if you have Dinopithecus, they do a very good job of killing the dragon specifically. It's the exact same thing as I described earlier where you just stay around its legs and attack. The dragon can't hit you when you're down here, it's easy. If you don't have Dinopithecus though, don't worry. My favorite strat for this boss fight is bringing in a couple of rhinos, charging around the arena, and whenever one of these 2 flyers land, just slamming them with rhinos. Therazinos are also very good here, of course. There is some other stuff that you can use, like strong Rexes, but just bring Theries or Rhinos. Rhinos are the most fun for sure, and you're never going to lose this fight with Rhinos or Theries. The reason I prefer Rhinos for this fight by far is because when you do the charge damage, it really takes advantage of every time these flyers land, because the hardest part of this fight is waiting for the 2 flying bosses to get on the ground. The rhinos just take advantage of that DPS a lot better. They're a lot faster too, so you can really avoid a lot of the projectiles from both the Manticore and the dragon. But realistically, Therazinos are easily able to avoid everything too. And they have a very high torpor amount, so they're not going to get knocked out by the Manticore. They're also just a ton of fun, especially if you bring veggie cakes. There's actually no way you're losing this fight. 3 more things to mention before we move on. First of all, remember, do not bring shoulder pets again. There is a Manticore in here. If you bring a shoulder pet, it has a chance of glitching out and just never landing, which is really dumb, but just keep it in mind. Secondly, this arena is incredibly hot, so definitely craft yourself a couple of Kalian soup. You can see the recipe for Kalian soup on screen now. This basically boosts your insulation from heat, which is a must-have in this fight. You also want to bring a lot of water and med brews, but having at least 1 Kalian soup for every 15 minutes you plan on being in the boss fight, in this case 2 should be enough. It does take a while to kill these because they fly around so much, but it shouldn't take more than 30 minutes in any situation. Shadow Steak is also a good idea. That pretty much insulates you from both cold and hot, so it's pretty much always a decent idea to bring to boss fights. This fight is no exception. And thirdly, definitely bring a good shotgun to the fight. You're going to want to be shooting down the Manticore when it's flying around the arena. It flies a lot more often than the dragon. Generally, how arena fights go when there's Manticore and dragon is that the Manticore flies around way more. You kill the dragon pretty quickly, and then you're sitting there trying to kill the Manticore for an hour. So if you have a good shotgun and you're shooting it down the entire time it's flying around, the fight's going to go a lot faster. When the bosses are flying around, you also want to target the rock golems very heavily. They're the only ground summon in this fight, so they're the only thing that can block your rhinos from charging the boss. Even if you have theories, you still want to kill the rock golems. They're just kind of annoying. But when the bosses land on the ground, you want to focus fully on the boss. Screw killing the rock golems. You can kill them when the dragon flies away or when the Manticore flies away. There's a limited time you can damage the bosses with your creatures. There's not a limited time where you can maul these rock golems. For Ark Survival Ascended, the boss changes from this arena to Nunatak, and Nunatak is way more difficult, but a lot more fun as well. On screen now, you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of difficulty for the boss fight. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 70. To fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 80. And to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 90. On Gamma, the boss has 650k HP. On Beta, it has 950k HP. And on Alpha, it has 1.25 million HP. Its abilities include an Ice Breath and a Manticore Spike attack on top of a basic bite. This boss is pretty tough. For cheese strats, I haven't really seen anything on the internet for it. In fairness, the boss is new, so there may be something that comes up later in the timeline of the game, but for now, there really isn't much here. The mini spawn for this fight is ice worms as well. There is a huge amount of these things spawning in the arena, and they are pretty strong, and they get much stronger with the difficulty increase. I've done a couple of hours of testing on this boss fight since it came out, and here's what I found to be the best strategies. Regardless of what you want to do, you want to bring a Uteranus. This boss flies around the arena a lot, so it's a pretty big stall fight, and there's a lot of damage being dealt out, so the percent buff means a lot in this fight. The best armies here are very strong and fast-moving creatures. The reason you want to have a fast-moving creature is because it flies around pretty quickly, so you want to be able to close the distance between where it's landing and where your army is pretty much whenever it lands. My recommendations include rhinos, bison, or Dinotherium with veggie cakes, so they can heal throughout the entire long fight. Bison and rhinos are my personal favorite picks. They're really fast, they have smaller hitboxes than the Dinotherium, and they're both incredibly strong. The bison pack buff and the rhino charge make them really tough to beat here, and they're both able to track the fast-flying Nunatak around the arena pretty effectively, while being able to maul through the ice worms. The arena temperature is actually not that bad. You'd think it's really cold based on how the arena looks, but it does not freeze that badly at all. It's a little bit cold, but if you have flak on, it pretty much balances out. While Nunatak is flying around, just focus on killing all the ice worms. The ice worms really are not too terrible, but there are a lot of them, so you don't want them to stack up. The boss's abilities are pretty similar to the Manticore and the Dragon combined, but I've noticed that the torpor dealing for this is nowhere near as bad as the Manticore on Scorched Earth, so you don't really have that much of a concern of getting knocked out. The Dragon Breath is also not a percent damage to carnivores, it just does a huge amount of damage. The reason I recommend herbivores for this fight anyway though is because the sweet veggie cakes make the creatures so much tankier than they originally are. So even if the strongest carnivores are a bit tankier by themselves, the veggie cakes make the herbivores tankier in a long fight, which this fight really is because it's tanky and flies around a lot. Dinopithecus and Rexes are also a pretty good choice. The problem is that they have bigger hitboxes and are a bit slower, so getting back to the boss takes a bit longer. I also really don't like their bigger hitboxes because you can't get 19 of them wrapped around the boss. If you're using something like a bison, you can easily get 10 to 12 of these things on the boss super quickly. I should also mention that Therazinos are still a very good choice for this boss fight. I know I haven't mentioned them in the section. The reason I haven't mentioned them is because the arena is so flat that rhinos are amazing, and bison are just so OP that there's pretty much no reason to use any other herbivore. The Dinopithecus is also slow, which is a big problem for this fight because traveling across the entire arena and getting stopped by ice worms all the time is really annoying on Dinopithecus. Overall, this fight's not terrible, but you definitely have to be prepared. It's way harder than the original arena boss fight. Up next is the 4 Extinction Titans. First off, let's go to the Desert Titan. To summon the Desert Titan, you can see the artifact requirements and the tribute requirements on screen now. The Desert Titan has 250k HP, and there's only one tier of this boss fight. It also doesn't have an arena, so there's no restrictions in terms of max amount of creatures you can bring, there's no timer restriction, and there's no maximum drag weight capacity, so you can use any creature for the fight. The Desert Titan's abilities are its lightning, its tail slap, and its spin move, and it also can send its flock onto you. The flock is a specific creature that the Desert Titan summons during its fight, and you can basically have the flock target you, which is really just bad news. You really don't want this to happen. Luckily, fighting this boss is kind of a joke, so you don't really have to worry about any of these abilities too much. I'll go over the best couple ways to fight it now. The first way to fight it is you can just sit on the ground with a mech and shoot up in the air to shoot it to death. The thing with the Desert Titan is a lot of the challenge with it is that it flies really high in the air over the entire desert biome, because its abilities are oriented to try to knock you off your mount or to stun you so you fall to your death. If you completely remove this threat from the boss, it's pretty much impossible to get killed by it. The mech's projectile range also can reach the Desert Titan for a decent portion if you just stand on a high elevation. This strategy does take a while, but yet again, there's no timer on this boss fight because it's just a Titan on Extinction. There's no timers for non-arena boss fights. So you have zero concern here about just taking your time, shooting it from the ground, and being super safe. It literally could be a primitive mech, that's good enough. The other strategy that's very commonly used is putting a Giga on the back of a Quetzal and just destroying this boss. Basically, all you have to do is go behind the Desert Titan and go onto its back here. Once you're here, all you have to do is have the Giga bite it. The Giga is a better choice here than the Karka for putting it on the Quetzal's back because there's no stacks that are going to be able to be gotten here on the back of the Desert Titan, and the raw power of a Giga is significantly higher than a Karka when the Karka can't get stacks. If you stay on the rear side of the back of the Desert Titan, it has a really hard time hitting you basically ever. The only ability that can still hit you when you're in this position is if it does that whole spin around a move. But if it's going for a spin, it telegraphs it pretty heavily, so you can just back off a little bit, let it do the spin, and then go back to hitting it afterwards. You can even just kill this boss with a Quetzal and not even use the Giga. Just hitting it with the Quetzal does work, but it is a bit slower, obviously, because Gigas are way stronger than Quetzals. This boss is just incredibly weak, though. You could use a bunch of Wyverns if you transfer them over from another map. You could use really heavily mutated RGs and crush this boss. That's how easy it is. Something like a Mana Garmer isn't going to work because it doesn't have enough stamina to get up here and deal consistent damage. The Desert Titan does fly really high in the air. But all the other methods I mentioned are extremely effective, and this boss is one of the easiest bosses in the game if you're prepared. Just don't get stunned too much. Stay on the back of it so its bite can't hit you and its lightning pretty much has a hard time hitting you. If you see the circle, make sure to avoid the lightning. That's really the most devastating attack in this boss fight by far. If the flock targets you, you can either back up a little bit so you just don't take as much damage because they do deal a lot of damage, or just chomp through it with a Giga. If it's about to spin, just back off a little bit, let it do the spin, and then go back to hitting it. And if you're looking to tame the Titan instead of killing it, all you have to do is just hit the corrupted nodules with your Quetzal. I recommend using the Quetzal for taming it instead of using the Giga, because the Giga's bite AoE is a lot bigger, so you do a lot more damage to the overall boss, which isn't really necessary for taming it. Using just a really good Quetzal is more than enough to tame it. Another funny strategy for taming it is you can just fly under the Desert Titan, and then when it goes to lightning you, it'll just lightning itself and damage its own nodes. This is a bit more advanced and not really necessary, but it is funny. I guess I should clarify this before I move on to, if you want to tame any of the 3 smaller Titans on Extinction, all you want to do is destroy the corrupted nodules that show up on it. You're basically ridding it of corruption so it can be tamed. This process does not involve you killing the boss. It's totally unnecessary to damage the boss besides those nodules, which is why I say stuff like Gigas are overkill for it. I personally always just use a mech unless I have another friend with me to sit on a Giga on the back of the Quetzal, but you can do the Giga strategy solo as well. It's just a bit more tedious. You have to do a bit of an interesting Quetzal-based design on the back of it so the Giga is trapped and can't run off the back of your Quetzal. Overall though, if you make a couple mistakes during this fight, it doesn't really matter. There's not really super high stakes here. The Desert Titan just really isn't capable of destroying your entire army in one fight like the Ice Titan or the Forest Titan are. It'll take you the longest to beat, and it'll be the easiest boss to beat on this map. Speaking of easy bosses to beat on this map, the Forest Titan is up next. On screen now you can see the summon requirements for the Forest Titan. Yet again, there's only one difficulty tier here, and the Forest Titan has 400k HP. The mini spawn for it is the Forest Wyvern, which is actually there to help you, and its abilities include a Vine Grab, Stomp, Basic Swipe, and summoning poisonous trees. This boss also doesn't have an arena, and is definitely tougher than the Desert Titan, but it's not hard. In terms of strategies to beat it, all you have to do is bring a giant army of really strong creatures. Gigas, Karkas, Dinopithecus, or Dreadnoughtus completely maul this boss. What you should be riding on is a mech for this fight. The reason a mech is so good, especially for the Forest Titan, is because you can't get grabbed out of the mech. This basically removes all the threats you can deal with from this boss. If you're in the back of a mech and you just stay back and shoot the boss with your lasers, you are never going to get killed by this thing. I've seen people in the past use Uranus or Daedons with it. It's really unnecessary if you have a couple of strong creatures. Seriously, an army of a couple of Dreadnoughtus will absolutely destroy this boss. Or a large army of Gigas, Karkas, or Dinopithecus will easily crush this too. In terms of all the other abilities like the poison, you can go and mount on the Forest Wyvern and destroy some of the poison if it makes you feel better, but it's completely unnecessary and a waste of time. When the Forest Wyverns land, you can mount them and use them to attack the boss because obviously fire is going to do pretty well against this boss because it's a tree. You can also use the Forest Wyverns to wreck the poisonous trees around the arena. But like I said before, it's pretty much redundant. You really don't need to focus on these poisonous trees or the Forest Wyverns at all. Just have your really strong army attack the boss. Make sure your mech is spaced away from the boss so you don't get hit with any of the slam abilities. Those do hurt a good bit. And make sure your army is consistently on the boss to deal damage. In terms of taming the Forest Titan, you can just use a mech. If you stay back far enough, yet again, the Forest Titan is the slowest Titan in the game by an absolute mile. So if you stay back and just shoot the corrupted nodules when they show up with the mech, it is a free tame. It's really not difficult at all. The nodes first show up on the shoulders, which are just easy to shoot at. The third node that spawns on the chin of the Forest Titan is definitely far more challenging to shoot at than the shoulder ones. But you can just use whatever creature you were using up to this point in the boss fight to get the boss low enough for the nodes to show up, to tank for you while you walk up closer to the Forest Titan to shoot the chin nodule. This will remove any chance that you have of accidentally getting the boss too low on HP. The boss fights can get kind of awkward if you get the Titan super low and you're trying to tame it. But in fairness, that does happen pretty rarely. If you get the boss low enough for the nodes to show up, you should have enough time to get the nodes killed and get the boss tamed. This is the easiest one to tame out of the three in the game because it's so slow and the nodes are pretty easily accessible. Just make sure you have an okay mech and shoot the nodes when they show up. GG. In Ark Survival Evolved, where you don't have Dreadnoughtus also, you really should tame the Forest Titan for every single King Titan fight you do because it's so tanky and that's something you really don't get with any wildly tamed creature. I'll talk about the King Titan later of course, but just keep this in mind. For the Ice Titan, I'm going to keep this section a bit more short because I've covered really everything for these three open world Titans already. You can see on screen now what you need to summon the Ice Titan. This also doesn't have an arena, has 350k HP, so it's a little bit less tanky than the Forest Titan, but it comes with a jumping ability, spike abilities, and projectile ice attacks that are a bit more damaging than the Forest Titan for sure. This is easily the toughest out of the three Titans that aren't the King Titan, but you can still easily kill it the exact same way you killed the Forest Titan. If you're trying to kill the boss, you can ride out either a mech or a Managarmer in the background just to avoid the Ice Titan. You really don't want this thing to jump at you, it's going to hurt a lot. The Managarmer is obviously very evasive, and the mech is good if you're trying to tame it. And if you're just trying to kill the Ice Titan, the Managarmer is probably your best bet because it's the most evasive creature on the map. Yet again, for army composition, you can bring a bunch of Dreadnoughtus, which is the best choice. Gigas, Karkas, and Dinopithecus are also still very good choices. It's really just the same process again. I'd recommend having a slightly bigger army for this fight compared to the Forest Titan just because it does more damage, so you want to really have enough creatures just in case some die. But if you're using something like Dreadnoughtus, it's totally overkill and you have nothing to worry about. For the tame process, yet again, just be in a mech and shoot projectiles from the mech at the Titan. It is going to be a very easy tame for you. Out of the three Titans, it is going to be the most dangerous for sure just because, yet again, it can close distance really quickly. The first node spawns on its back right leg, which can be a bit annoying to hit, but it's not too bad, especially if you're just positioned far away from the boss and it's attacking your army. If you have two players, it's much easier to hit this back right leg just because it's not going to be able to face both of you at the same time. You could have a buddy flank in the back or just shoot a fab sniper at it from a far distance. The second one spawns on his shoulder, which can be a bit difficult to hit just because he sways around a lot, but it's not going to be too bad. And the third one spawns on his chest, which is really easy to hit. In ASA, yet again, you really don't need to tame any Titans technically because you can just crush the boss with the Dreadnoughtus in all three difficulties. But I definitely recommend taming this for the King Titan fight. It does a lot of damage and is super strong. Up next is the King Titan. You can see the summon requirements for all three difficulties of this fight on screen now. The King Titan also doesn't have an arena. This boss is just way bigger and way stronger. It has 1.5 million HP on all three difficulties. The tiers just scale damage of abilities, strength of summoned creatures. They heavily spike the resistance for the King Titan, so it does still get tankier, but they just keep the HP the same for some reason here. Its mini spawns are just a ridiculously large variety of corrupted creatures. On screen now you can see a list of a majority of them. There may be some that I'm missing. Its abilities include a meteor shower, summoning corrupt creatures like I just mentioned, a charged fist, the Stomp of Doom, and a breath beam. I am making up the Stomp of Doom name, but that attack just sucks, so it's getting called the Stomp of Doom for this video. In terms of how to beat this boss fight, if you're in Ark Survival Ascended, just use Dreadnoughtus, please. It is so much easier than any other method. It's 1000% the best choice. You can bring a couple of the other Titans with you as well, like the Forest Titan and the Ice Titan. That's not a bad idea, but it's totally unnecessary. Generally speaking, with the King Titan, the hardest difficulties are the Gamma and the Beta version. I'll explain why that is in a second. But for the Gamma and the Beta difficulties, you can easily just use an army of 20 to 30 Dreadnoughtus, and it's a complete overkill. If you have really good mutated ones, you can beat it with as low as 8 to 10. Especially if you bring the Ice Titan and the Forest Titan with you, those two plus 8 to 10 really strong Dreadnoughtus is a complete stomp. In Ark Evolved, the strategy changes pretty drastically because there's no Dreadnoughtus, so the fight gets way harder. The way to beat the boss in Evolved is by using a huge army of Gigas or Karkas, whatever you prefer. I prefer Gigas personally because it's pretty hard to get enough stacks on the Karkas to make them stronger than the Gigas in this fight, but both definitely work. And then sending in groups of Gigas or Karkas at a time to fight the boss. You're going to have a lot larger of an army than you did in Ascended because the Gigas just aren't strong enough to be anywhere near as good as the Dreadnoughtus for this fight. And when you're attacking the boss, you want to have your Gigas in different ordering groups because if you send all of them in at once, they're all going to die to a couple of stomps and then you're pretty screwed. Groups of about 10 to 20 Gigas work the best in my opinion. It gives you enough damage on the boss to be effective while not sacrificing too many. Sending in all your Gigas at once simply doesn't work because you can't get 100 Gigas around the King Titan's feet to attack it. So you're going to waste a lot of DPS and those Gigas are going to die before they even do damage to the boss. You also want to have some Gigas or Karkas on the outside of the arena to kill all the corrupted creatures that the boss spawns, because that makes it a lot easier for the Gigas that are attacking the boss to not get distracted. You also definitely want the Ice Titan and the Forest Titan helping you out in this. The fight is just a lot harder if you don't have the Titans, because the Titans give you a lot of tankiness that the Gigas simply do not have. In terms of what you're doing, you should probably be in a tech suit flying around on the background for Gamma and Beta. The reason for this is because you're just very maneuverable in a tech suit, and you can fly around and shoot a tech rifle at the boss, which does a decent amount of damage. It's also a lot easier to manage your entire army because if you have different groups far away from the boss, using a tech suit to go over there and then whistle a new group to attack the boss is pretty easy. In terms of what you should be focusing on during the fight, there's one major thing, which is the meteor showers. Just do not get hit by a meteor, you're gonna die. The other abilities for the King Titan, like the Punch, Breath, and Stomp, are really more oriented towards your army that are right below it. You're not really ever gonna get targeted by these abilities, so as long as you stay a bit back and watch out for the meteors, you're pretty safe here. One more really important thing to note for this fight is that you want to keep the King Titan from walking around too much. If it walks too far from the center of the arena, it's going to get pulled back to the center, and basically what happens when this occurs is the King Titan regenerates a huge amount of its HP, making the fight exponentially harder every time this happens. Realistically, when you're fighting it, it's going to walk away from the center at least once just because it knocks back your creature so far with its punch and then walks towards them, so it does naturally go farther away from the center. But avoid this as much as you can. The more times it restores HP, the less chance you have of winning. The Gamma and the Beta fight for this is a lot harder than the Alpha fight, because during the Alpha fight, you can bring the Mega Mech with you for the fight. The Mega Mech in and of itself can fight with the King Titan pretty effectively. If you pair the Mega Mech with the Ice Titan and the Forest Titan, you can generally just beat the boss with those three. Yet again, avoid those meteors, but besides that, you're pretty good to just hit the boss. It is going to be a pretty tough fight regardless, but it is a lot easier than the other two fights because you don't have to sacrifice hundreds of Gigas. You also definitely want the Mega Mech during the Alpha King Titan fight for Ascended as well. The Mega Mech is just incredibly strong and makes the boss so much easier to beat. Avoid meteors, bring a lot of preparation and be pretty patient, and don't let the King Titan walk too far and you're going to be totally fine here. Up next is the Valguero Arena, and this arena consists of the Megapithecus, Dragon, and Manticore. On screen now you can see the summon requirements for all three tiers of difficulty for this boss fight. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 50, to fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 85, and to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 100. This boss is a joke, but it's incredibly worth doing. The reason it's so worth doing is because killing these three bosses gives you so many of the tech grams that any player needs. The bosses are also more nerfed than they've ever been before, so it's incredibly easy to beat the fight. This is the weakest version of the Dragon, Megapithecus, and Manticore you see in the entire game. The Manticore doesn't even spawn rock golems or death worms anymore. The arena is incredibly large and flat, so you can compartmentalize and fight one boss at a time, and you can use a ton of different strategies like Rhinos, Dinopithecus, Rexes, Theres, Spinos, anything you want really. It's really easy. And the arena is pretty normally temperatured too, so there's not really an arena threat either. There's also a little bit of water in the arena, which gives you another way to beat the boss with the hydrated buff, but it is off to the side a little bit. It's completely unnecessary for beating the boss, but it makes it even easier. In my personal opinion, the best method to beat this boss is just using Dinopithecus. Dinopithecus bleed bosses like I've talked about before. The Dragon's incredibly weak to Dinopithecus, and the other two bosses are a complete joke in general. So if you bring about 15 Dinopithecus, which are really strong against the Dragon, and then a couple tanky creatures like a Rex, Theres, Spino, or something else, on top of a Uranus to roar everything, you're in a really good spot here. You can really make whatever strong mutated army you want for this boss fight. You're going to crush these three regardless of what you bring. If I've mentioned it in this video at all for being a good boss fighting creature, it's going to get the job done here for sure. The main advice I will give is that when you start this boss fight, the most easy way to get it done quickly is sitting in spawn and waiting. What's going to happen by this is the dragon's going to land near you first, and if you stay in spawn, the Megapithecus isn't even going to come over and bother you, so you get to compartmentalize and kill the dragon before anything else bothers you. After you kill the dragon, the Manticore is going to fly around for 90% of the fight, and you're just going to kill the Megapithecus, which still spawns Gigantopithecus, but is incredibly nerfed in terms of stats, and then you're just going to shotgun down the Manticore and wait for it to fall. One thing I will recommend for this boss fight's Manticore AI in general is when you sit in a group and you're really clustered together, the Manticore seems to land a lot faster. I don't know what it is, but whenever I have really spread out creatures in this fight, for example, if you have a bunch of rhinos charging in different areas of the arena, it takes a lot longer for the Manticore to land, which just wastes time. Also, yet again, do not bring a shoulder pet. There's a Manticore. It can glitch the boss out. Not fun. But you really just want to have any strong army, and just take advantage of whenever the Manticore lands. If you're fighting, for example, the Megapithecus in the middle of the fight, and the Manticore lands somewhere, go target the Manticore while it's down. The only way I've ever seen people fail this fight is time failing because the Manticore flies in the air for so long here. The boss fight gives you a ton of element and a ton of tech engram, so I definitely recommend it. And it's also pretty fun getting a wide variety of bosses at the same time, especially if you wait and spawn and just kill the dragon first. Up next is the Crystal Wyvern Queen from Crystal Isles, and on screen now you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of difficulty for the boss fight. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 55, to fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 75, and to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 100. The boss has 400,000 HP on Gamma, 675,000 HP on Beta, and 950,000 HP on Alpha. This boss has an arena, but unlike other boss fights, this actually allows you to bring flyers in, and I highly recommend using this strategy. The abilities this boss have are pretty cool as well. It has the breath attack from all 3 Crystal Wyvern variants, the Tropical Crystal Wyvern, the Blood Crystal Wyvern, and the Ember Crystal Wyvern. It has stages where it flies around the arena and where it's sitting on its throne. When it's sitting on the throne, it's basically creating more Crystal Wyverns to attack you. All 3 variants will attack you throughout the fight. It can also shoot projectiles at you while it's sitting on the throne. It can do this when it's flying or on the throne, but that's worth noting. But this boss fight is really only difficult if you're fighting it without flyers. The reason is because it spends so much time in the air and all the creatures it's summoning are in the air. So whenever you're on the ground trying to hit this, it's pretty difficult because it's not close enough to the floor for you to hit it for a lot of the fight. For this reason, if you're using creatures specifically from Crystal Isles, I would recommend using Blood Crystal Wyverns for this boss fight. And if you're not using Crystal Isles specific creatures, I recommend using something like a Lightning Wyvern army or a Fire Wyvern army. Regular Wyverns are a lot stronger than Crystal Wyverns, but Crystal Wyverns are more than enough for this fight. Crystal Wyverns also have the benefit that's super underrated of having a smaller turning radius. This is so much more beneficial than you even realize. When you're fighting this boss and you're all flying in circles and going upwards, it's going to happen at least once if you're using flyers. Having the smaller turn radius to get more damage on the boss is super convenient. You can also use an army of another flyer like an RG, but the RGs are a lot slower than the boss and the minis it summons, so this is kind of a pain in the ass. But you really can use a lot of the strong flying creatures for this arena. RGs in and of themselves aren't insanely powerful, but you do get saddles on top of them, which gives them extra armor, which makes them similar to some of the Wyverns. I do have a couple of friends who swear by the fact that RGs are terrible for this boss fight just because the speed is so bad, so do keep that in mind if you're going with this method. If you're fighting it from the ground, just use a basic Rex and UD army in my opinion. You could use other stuff, there's a lot of options that are strong enough to kill this boss, but the Rex and UD army is a classic and works just fine here. They're also one of the taller and bulkier boss fighting options, which helps a lot for this fight. It just allows them to hit a lot of the threats a lot easier, and they're obviously a classic and an incredibly strong creature. If you are on the ground, just make sure to avoid the giant Crystal Wyvern Queen projectiles. The mini Crystal Wyvern projectiles aren't super dangerous, but the main projectiles from the main boss do hurt a ton, especially the blood one hurts a lot. One more thing of note is that the Crystal Wyvern Queen projectiles are a lot bigger and they go a lot farther and they do a lot more damage. They're just basically way stronger versions of the basic attacks that the regular Crystal Wyverns have. So just keep this in mind and try to avoid those specifically if you're in this fight, if you can. TLDR, bring Blood Crystal Wyverns, they'll lifesteal the boss, they're really strong, they have a good turn radius so they can crush the boss, and flyers are a lot better than land creatures for this, but land creatures can work. Up next is the Gem 1 boss fight, starting with Moeder. Moeder's boss fight is found in the One Tough Moeder mission in the deep parts of the ocean biome. On Gamma, it has 490,000 HP, on Beta, it has 686,000 HP, and on Alpha, it has 960,400 HP. To find the mission terminal for the One Tough Moeder boss fight, just go to your mission menu in your inventory, type in the name for it, and then you can track it and you can find it really easily. There's 2 different phases in the Moeder boss fight. The first phase is when it's buried in the ground deep at the bottom of the arena. When it's down here, it's going to summon a couple of eels around the arena that you need to kill to get it to come out. These eels do scale in stats based on the difficulty, but they're incredibly easy to kill regardless of the difficulty. There's also more eels on higher difficulties. Once you kill the eels, it'll come out, attack for a while. Once you do enough damage to it, it'll bury again and it'll summon more eels. This boss is pretty strong, but beating it is also not too difficult. It does have one really annoying tornado ability, but if you bring strong underwater creatures, the boss is not tough to kill. When I'm taking on this fight, I prefer riding on a Tuzo for the fight to be entirely safe from the Moeder's abilities and from getting stunned, and then having an army of Mosasaurs to kill Moeder itself. Megalodon packs can work against the lower difficulties of Moeder as well due to their exceptionally good pack buff, but from my personal experience, Megalodon do fall short against the alpha difficulty of the boss. It's just too strong for them. The Mosas have that extra tankiness that the Megalodons lack, even though Megalodons do also do an insane amount of damage. So the Mosas can survive long enough to fight it really effectively, and do a ridiculous amount of damage. The reason I don't recommend Tuzos for this fight is because you simply cannot fit 20 Tuzos in the arena bubble to get into the arena. Basically, whenever you start a boss fight in Ark, there's a bubble around you where you have to fit all 20 of your creatures in to get transported to the arena. There's simply not enough room in this underwater bubble for 20 Tuzos to fit. Usually what I do is when I'm riding on the Tuzo, I'll kill the eels with my Tuzo, and then I just have the Mosas attack the boss. You can go towards the boss with the Tuzo too, it really doesn't matter. A tanky Tuzo is never going to get killed by this boss. One more thing that's worth noting is I do think Zifactinus are going to be an excellent choice for this boss fight if they can bleed the boss. Ark Survival Ascended's version of Gen 1 hasn't released yet, but if this does happen to be a thing where the Zifactinus can bleed the boss, I'll make sure to include it in my Genesis 1 guide when that map drops. Up next is the Master Controller. Good luck. Nah, in all seriousness, the Gamma difficulty for the boss needs you to complete 58 missions on the map, Beta needs you to complete 116 missions, and Alpha needs you to complete 168 missions. These missions don't have to be any specific difficulty. The way it breaks down is that you can skip 8 total missions of any difficulty on the entire map and still fight the Alpha variant. There's 176 total available missions. This leaves a bit of room because there are some missions that are just not completable in solo, and a lot of the missions on this map are just really tough or just incredibly annoying. On the bright side, only the person that starts the boss fight needs to have this mission count done, so you can bring as many of your buddies who have done 0 missions as you want if you have all the missions done yourself. This fight is brutal, especially on alpha difficulty, and especially as a solo player. The concept of this fight is pretty consistent between its 4 phases. It basically just has increasing strength of creatures and avatar-like humans spawn in to attack you, and you need to kill the avatars for keys that they drop. Here's the tough part of the fight though. To grab the keys you need for the terminals to complete the phases, you need to be on foot for both grabbing the keys because you have to run over them, and you need to be on foot to deposit them into the terminal. The first 3 phases aren't too bad if you have strong tames and really strong gear, but phase 4 is where the process shifts. In phase 4 of the fight, you'll be forced to deal with the boss summoning the strongest creatures yet like Gigas and Reapers, and it also starts shooting lasers at you which can stun you off your tames. To damage the boss in this phase, you have to collect and deposit more keys, and every time you deposit 20 keys, you can deal 1/4 of the Master Controller's final HP because it basically drops its shield and you can do damage to it. This boss is just not balanced for single player, putting it frankly, and there's really not that many ways you can really consistently beat it, but here's the best tips I can give you. Firstly, if you can, bring as many players as possible. This boss, more than any other boss in Ark, is exponentially easier with the more players that you have in the arena. Even with just 2 players, you can have one person dedicated to getting keys on the ground, and then whenever that player gets low, he can get onto a mount, heal himself with med brews, maybe switch out his armor set, and then have the other player get off his tame that was protecting that guy, and then have that guy go get more keys. There's also a limited quantity of keys that can be on the floor at once, so you're going to want to continually pick up keys as you go. Sitting around killing a ton of enemies while you aren't earning more keys just wastes more HP on your tame and stalls the fight. You should also only dismount when you're surrounded by tames if you're in single player especially, because you want your creatures to protect you, and you should bring spare sets of flak, literally hundreds of med brews. You should also bring as many custom consumables as you can to the fight. For example, Focal Chili is an excellent thing to have in this fight for the boosted movement speed. And you should also consider using a Mind Wipe tonic prior to the fight and pumping a lot of extra movement speed into your character. Ideally, when you're prepping for this boss fight, you want to have as much health and as much movement speed as you physically can pump. This will just give you an extra chance to win the fight that you might not have had if you didn't change your levels. Everything about this boss fight is efficiency based. You need to move fast, you need to be surrounded by strong tames the entire time so you don't waste armor durability and med brews, and you need to position yourself well so that keys drop in optimal areas. For example, if you're in the 4th phase, make sure you're killing the avatars near the bridges so they can protect you from the lasers when you're trying to get keys. Another good idea for all 4 phases is killing the avatars closer to the drop-off point so you don't have to travel across the arena so many times. In terms of good tames that you can bring, there's a few good choices. Tech Rexes have really good stats, Theries are good for their combination of stats and speed, as well as their ability to eat sweet veggie cakes which makes them more durable. Rhinos are awesome for this fight if you have multiple people for charging and the power they generate. It's just really a strong choice too. Just remember that regardless of what you're using in terms of tames, to shoot the drones as you're running through the fight. These drones will chip away at you so badly if you don't deal with them, and they fly too high in the air for any TAM to kill them. And if you're doing this fight solo, basically stay on foot the entire time unless you're getting somewhat low or you need to reset your armor because the durability is low. Also, if the enemy starts to really stack up, you can go on a TAM and help clear them out. But the more time you're spending on foot, getting keys and dropping them off, the faster this fight goes and the better chance you have. The creatures that the Master Controller summons are not as strong as the normal counterparts, but do not underestimate this fight. It's easily the toughest Ark has to offer, especially if you're in solo player. My best advice, honestly, is good luck. For Genesis 2, there's only one major boss, but there is a mini boss, which is the Experimental Giga, which I'll also talk about. The Experimental Giga appears in the Code Red mission on Genesis 2. To find it, yet again, just go to your mission tab in your inventory and track it. This boss is really not that bad. My recommendation generally is just bringing a couple of strong Shadow Mains. There's other really strong creatures that can mull it as well. There's many good choices, but the Shadow Main is also good for the rest of the mission, so that's why I recommend that choice. This boss is pretty simple. You get creatures to assist you from earlier in this mission because there's an entire phase where you basically rescue creatures, and then these rescued creatures will join you in fighting the Experimental Giga at the end of the mission. In reality, most of these creatures aren't really that helpful. On screen now you can see the list of trapped creatures that you can rescue, so clearly some creatures are better than others. But yet again, none of these are really going to help you that much. This mini boss does come in 3 difficulty tiers. All of them are about the same in terms of the strategy. Just bring a bunch of strong Shadow Mains and you'll be totally fine. The Experimental Giga has poison orbs that it shoots from its tentacles. It's about the size of a Titanosaur, which is super intimidating, and the thing has some serious stats, but yet again, it's nowhere near as strong as most bosses. Another good option besides some strong Shadow Mains is literally just bringing a tanky Stego and Veggie Kicks. This strategy involves using a weapon on the back of your Stego to just melt the boss. My favorite choice for this specifically is using the Tek Phase Pistol for it. Using a Tek Phase Pistol on the back of a Stego that's super tanky just melts this boss. It's pretty funny too. There's other okay strategies for this too because the boss is pretty easy overall, but Shadow Mains are the simplest and the most foolproof for both the mission and the boss fight, so I highly recommend trying them out for this. Up next is Rockwell Prime, and to fight the boss on Gamma, you have to beat all the Gamma missions on the map and have 6 mutagen. To fight the boss on Beta, you have to beat all the Beta missions on the map and have 12 mutagen. And to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to beat all the Alpha level missions on the map and have 24 mutagen. If you have all the Alpha missions done, you can do the Beta or the Gamma versions of the fight. It just takes whatever your highest difficulty is and applies it to the fights. You don't have to go through every mission 3 times. Unlike Genesis 1, every player that's entering this boss arena needs to have these missions done, so make sure you do them. This boss can be really overwhelming, but it's very simple if you know what you're doing. You have to go to the Rockwell Heart on the west half of the map on the Terminus mission to find it, and this boss can be beaten really easily if you do prep ahead of time. The mini creatures it spawns are the tentacles that you see in the Rockwell zone, corrupted warriors, and the summoners that you also see in the normal Rockwell zone. The fight progresses when you kill a certain amount of enlarged purple tentacles and then kill portions of the main boss when they open up to you. There's many ways to fight this boss, but from my experience, the best way to do it is just using a Stego. Get a super tanky Stego for every player that's going into the fight. This definitely works in single player too, but the more the merrier. Get a ton of Veggie Kicks on your Stego, get a strong shotgun, or a strong tech rifle. Tech rifles are generally the best for DPS, but a shotgun definitely works too. Flak, and a ton of med brews for every player that's in there. Here's how you beat this boss easily every time. Ride around, shoot the big tentacles with a shotgun, monitor your HP constantly and med brew up to survive the poison AoE attacks that you get hit with. And once you kill enough of the purple tentacles, shoot all the summoners and use the exomech to beam the portion of the Rockwell Prime boss that opens up. The reason you're killing the summoners specifically is that they hurt a lot. You really don't want to deal with them. The other mini spawns are pretty easy to kill. The summoners are kind of annoying. You can also use other stuff like Shadow Mains or other strong Tims, but that overcomplicates the fight for no reason. All you need to do is survive long enough to kill the tentacles, and then the boss is really easy to kill with the exomech. If you do end up going with this Shadow Main or other really strong creature route, just keep in mind the fact that you're going to have to kill a lot more of the things in the arena because these armies are not oriented to tank everything in the arena, and there is a lot of damage being dealt to you and your creature here. So if you bring less tanky creatures, definitely invest more of your time during the fight, killing everything around the arena. Specifically, kill the warriors and the summoners much faster. The tentacles are always going to respawn anyway, so that's less of a priority. But with the Stegos, you really can just ignore a lot of stuff. Yet again, be really careful because there is poison AoE attacks that you get hit with, so definitely make sure you have a ton of med brews on you. And I'd also recommend watching a full boss walkthrough for this boss specifically before you fight it for the first time. The reason I recommend that for this boss more than any other boss in the game is because there's just a lot of stuff going on in the moment and you can get a bit overwhelmed if you're not ready for it. And even though I'm showing you a lot of the boss fight in the background here, seeing the entire thing at once and just being able to watch it and understand what's going on is really helpful for this boss fight. You also can just use the stego and then a tech rifle and a shotgun and just use the weapons to kill everything in the fight, including Rockwell Prime, but this is a little bit slower. Generally speaking, staying on the stego is much safer though, just because you're not going to die if all you're getting hit with is the AoE from poison attacks, because you can just med brew out of that really easily. Also, if you are going with the stego route, definitely bring one of each gender to get the mate boost. This makes you so much tankier, it's incredibly helpful. But you by yourself can definitely kill the boss. You don't need somebody riding the second stego if there's a good saddle. The second stego would just be there to give you a mate boost to make you way tankier. Up next is the Dinopithecus King from Lost Island, and you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of difficulty on screen now. To fight the boss on Gamma difficulty, you have to be level 55. To fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 75. And to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 100. On Gamma difficulty, this boss has 375,000 HP. On Beta difficulty, this boss has 600,000 HP. And on Alpha difficulty, this boss has 825,000 HP. Fighting this boss can be done in a lot of ways, but there's a few major things to watch out for. Most importantly, the mini creatures that this boss spawns are absolutely brutal. It summons Dinopithecus that are on the back of a Amargasaurus, and Dinopithecus that are getting carried by Cinemacrops. The Dinopithecus on the Cinemacrops and the Amargasaurus can damage you off your mount if you're not careful, which is extremely dangerous. This means you need to target and kill them whenever you see them. How I like fighting this boss fight is staying far back out of Uranus and roaring my army, making sure that your army is targeting all those Dinopithecus when they spawn in. My pick for this fight personally is the Shadowmane for one simple reason: natural armor. The Dinopithecus, on top of being a nuisance to fight, also reduces armor rating on saddles, so your tames are much less tanky. Admittedly, there is one downside to using Shadowmanes for this boss fight if you're on the back of a Uranus, because the Uranus has higher drag weight than Shadowmane, so if you're on a Uranus, you're going to get targeted by everything in the arena. For this reason, I usually bring a couple of Rexes that I've pumped a lot of HP into. Even though they don't get as much armor from their saddles, they're still tanky enough to survive the fight, and they pull aggro from everything including the boss, and then I fill out the rest of my army with a ton of Shadowmanes. Generally speaking, it doesn't really matter that much if you're getting targeted by the boss, but in this fight specifically where all the minis can actually just kill you off the back of your mount, it matters a lot more. Especially considering some of the minis getting spawned can fly over to where you are over your army, which is a very big issue, especially if you go with something like Therazinos, which are really strong, but will not grab the aggro of anything in the arena because they have less drag weight than the UD. For the Dinopithecus King himself, he jumps up onto his perch and throws projectiles at you, and then goes down back to the arena to fight you. Whenever he's on his perch, definitely just focus the minis and avoid the projectiles, and when he's down, pretty much damage him unless your character is getting damaged by a mini, and then just go kill that mini if you need to. When the Dinopithecus King is perched, you can't hit him with any tame and you have to shotgun him. Generally speaking, it's not really worth it. The boss is incredibly tanky, and he spends a lot of the time fighting you directly. So there's not that much of an importance of shooting the boss when he's up there. In terms of cheese strats, there actually is a Procoptodon spot you can go to on this boss fight. What you want to do is you need to go to the main arena, shoot at the boss a few times to bait him over, pull him out of the main area back into the tunnel where you came in, and jump up to this spot. When the Dinopithecus King is under you from this spot, he'll never go back and perch because he simply can't jump up to a perch spot from where he's standing, and you can shotgun the boss to death with no problems. Just make sure to kill the Cinemacrops Dinopithecus. They can sometimes hit you here, but it's pretty rare. Overall though, this fight's pretty easy. Just make sure to watch your health, have a lot of med brews to heal yourself back up if you're getting damaged, and focus the boss when he's not perched. Also, if you're using a regular army, don't really bother with getting insanely good saddles for it, because they're going to get nerfed pretty badly in the fight anyway, like I mentioned earlier. So really good saddles are less of a requirement for this fight than any other fight in the game. Unless you're using Shadowmanes yet again, of course, because they are immune to this and they still get the tankiness, making them the best choice for the fight in my opinion. Moving on to Fjordur now, there's 7 bosses to cover here. First, let's start with the 3 mini bosses. Up first is Bela, and Bela is just really easy. It's by far the weakest boss in the entirety of Ark, and it's an open world mini boss, so you can use whatever you want against it. It requires 30 runestones to summon, and you have to be level 50 to fight it, and it's found inside of a cave at 4.5, 47.3 in Midgard. Bela summons multiple mini bees and is a flying boss, but luckily it's just so weak that it doesn't really matter. My favorite strategy for this fight revolves around the fact that a Giga can fit into this cave. You can easily 1v1 this with a Giga. Other options are bringing a couple of Rexes, Theres, Spinos, Megatheriums actually get buffed against this boss, or literally any other strong tame in the game. Generally speaking, you want to bring a taller creature. Yet again, when you're fighting these flying bosses, having a taller creature is nice because the boss gets caught up on your creatures a lot more often, and it's a lot easier to actually hit the boss. But it really doesn't matter for this fight. You can use Dinopithecus. It takes a little bit longer to kill it, but you do the bleed, which is really strong. Shadowmanes also work because they're incredibly strong creatures in general. You may be getting the idea here. This boss is a pushover. Any decently strong creature, or just 1v1ing it with a Giga is a complete joke. The second mini-boss is Haughty and Skull. There's also no artifact requirements for this boss fight. It requires 30 runestones again, level 50 again, and it's located in Asgard at 20.54, 37.09. Haughty and Skull is basically two giant Fenrirs, and they summon more mini Fenrirs with them, and they have a couple of abilities, but the main one you want to worry about is the fire ability. They have a couple of other abilities that do decent damage, and they have one that moon freezes you, which basically just impairs you and blinds you for a few seconds. But these abilities are really nothing to worry about. The fire is the big issue. Luckily, this boss is not too bad, especially if you're approaching it with a good strategy. The main thing you want to know about this fight is that when there's Haughty and Skull attacking you, you want to attack Skull first because Skull has half the HP of Haughty. Skull is the yellow Fenrir. Killing Skull first just reduces the damage they're dealing to you by half, and then once one of them is dead, it's really easy to kill the second one. If you've ever played Terraria before, it's kind of like fighting the twins a little bit. You basically just want to take out one first and focus one because the fight is so much easier when they're not together. These guys are a lot stronger than Bela, so you're not going to be able to beat it with just one meh Giga. If you have one really strong Giga that can still 1v2 it, or just bring a couple of Gigas and target Skull yet again first. A couple of Rexes, Shadowmanes, Dinopithecus, or any other strong creature can crush this boss fight also. This is definitely a lot stronger than Bela, but if your creatures are strong and you're ready to go, it's not going to be too difficult. There's no risk of you dying off the back of your mount, and it's also open world, so you can do whatever you want for it. Bela can be beaten by a wild tamed Giga. The difference here is generally having an imprinted Giga is good enough. That'll make the fight pretty easy. Also make sure the boss doesn't run too far away from the terminal you summon at, because if it runs too far away from the terminal, it'll fully reset its HP and go back to the terminal by teleporting. So just keep it near where it spawns and then take it out. Take out the weaker one first, yet again that's the yellow one, and then take out the stronger one second. You do want to be pretty quick with this fight because there is fire that does a % damage to any creature that's attacking it. But yet again, it really shouldn't be too bad with any strong army, or just a really strong Giga or a couple of normal Gigas. The last mini-boss is Steinbjorn. There's no artifact requirements again. It's the same 30 rune stones and level 50 requirement. The arena is in Jotunheim at 77.431. And the hardest part about this boss fight is that it is freezing cold here, so definitely bring fur for this fight. Other consumables like Shadow Stake are also really helpful. This boss summons rubble bears, is super tanky and does decent damage. It's definitely tougher than the other two mini-bosses in my opinion, but it's just a mini-boss with no arena limitation, so it's still easy. This boss has a high resistance to most oncoming damage, but there are two boss viable creatures on Fjordur that bypass its resistance, Gigas and Rock Golems. Other good options besides these include a basic Rex, Shadowmane, Dinopithecus, Spino, and Theory army. Basically all the options I've described countless times across this guide by now are good enough to beat the open world mini-boss. Just bring any strong creature army and use it for everything on this map because there's 7 bosses here, so it's kind of a gauntlet. My recommendation is just to use one strong Giga or a couple of weaker Gigas against all these mini-bosses, or just start building up your boss fighting army and then crush all 7 bosses by going through these 3, then going through the 3 Island Guardians, and then fighting Fenrisulfr, which I'll get to in a second. Therazinos are really good universally here because they resist the dragon's flame breath, and are easily strong enough to kill all 7 bosses on the map. But there are some other good choices. I'll talk about the Fenrisulfr fight in a second, yet again, but any of the stuff I described for that fight will work very well against all these mini-bosses. The next 3 bosses on Fjordur are the Island Guardians again. On screen now you can see the summon requirements for the Broodmother, Megapithecus, and Dragon, and all 3 of these have the exact same abilities, stats, arenas, and have the exact same summon and start requirements besides adding 1 relic depending on the mini-boss. For the Broodmother, you have to add the Bela relic, for the Megapithecus, you have to add the Steinbjorn relic, and for the Dragon, you have to add the Haughty and Skull relic. Besides this one change, all 3 of these bosses are the same. The only other difference is that you have more creatures at your disposal on Fjordur than you did on the island. On Fjordur, you have creatures like the Shadowmane, which are incredibly good against the Broodmother because there's water in the arena and they can get the hydrated buff. Against the Megapithecus, you can use a wide variety of strong tames, but Fjordur has everything I discussed earlier and more. And for the Dragon, you don't have to transfer over Dinopithecus now because Dinopithecus simply spawn on the map. But yet again, all these bosses' strategies have been discussed earlier in the video. If you forgot or you don't know where the timestamps are, on screen now you can see the start for the Broodmother section. I went through all 3 of these bosses in detail earlier in the video at that timestamp. The last boss on Fjordur is Fenrisulfr, and on screen now you can see the summon requirements for all 3 difficulties. To fight the boss on Gamma, you have to be level 55. To fight the boss on Beta, you have to be level 75. And to fight the boss on Alpha, you have to be level 100. It has 385,000 HP on Gamma, 750,000 HP on Beta, and 1.2 million HP on Alpha, so it does get a lot harder on the higher difficulties. Fenrisulfr spawns Fenrirs for its minis. Its abilities include spikes, a really high speed, a lot of summons, and a couple of magical abilities like the Spirit Wolf. And the most important thing to look out for during this fight is that Spirit Wolf attack. The major weaknesses for this boss is that there's water in the arena, and that it's on a map that basically every creature is available on. The Shadowmane is my favorite pick for this boss fight by far because they're ridiculously powerful, get natural armor that make it really tanky, and it gets the hydrated buff on top of its already great stats because of the arena. Another choice I like, which might sound basic, is the Spino, especially for this fight. The reason I really like the Spino during this fight especially is because they knock back the Fenrir summons a lot with their basic attacks, which gives them a lot more time to focus on the boss, and they don't take nearly as much damage from the Fenrirs as other army options. They're also equipped with really high speed, so they can keep up with the Fenrisulfr, which dashes around the arena really fast. The downside of the Spinos generally is that they have bad AI and they use the quadrupedal stance a lot for attacking, which does less damage than their bipedal stance. But for this fight, it doesn't even hurt you that they're doing this because they're so much faster when they're in the quadrupedal stance that they'll be on the boss's ass the entire time. One important note you should keep in mind with Shadow Mains is that their drag weight is 350 compared to the Uranus' 500, so the boss will target you if you're on a Uti during the fight. The issue with this specifically for the Fenrisulfr boss fight is that the Fenrirs also target you, and those do a lot of damage, and there's a lot of them, and they're really fast. There is some ways to deal with the Fenrirs chasing you around the arena like headless chickens, but I'll get to that later in the section. Generally speaking, it's just best to avoid this situation. In my opinion, it's really not worth the hassle. You can, but it's not super fun. For this reason, I generally just bring 20 Shadow Maids to this boss fight and crush it with great stats. A Rex and Uti army can also work extremely well here, as it's effective against most bosses in the game. Basically, whatever army you build throughout your entire playthrough, for example, if you breed a really strong Rex army to take on the 6 bosses prior to Fenrisulfr, just use a Rex army for Fenrisulfr, it'll totally work. Dinopithecus can also be used for the bleed damage, but they get knocked back so bad by this boss and many of its abilities, so I don't really love Dinopithecus for this fight specifically. They are definitely strong enough for it, but it's a little bit more annoying. Regardless of whatever army you choose to go with, just make sure to do 2 things. 1, stay back from the boss a decent bit, because if the Spirit Wolf attack comes out, you gotta dodge it. It can do so much damage to you regardless of what you have. And secondarily, bring Med Brews just in case you do get hit, and really good flak so you don't die. One more thing that you can do with this boss fight is you can utilize the elevation changes in the fight really well. What I mean by this is if you have Fenrisulfr or its mini Fenrirs coming after you and trying to hit you, you can go up on top of a cliff and then the AI gets kind of bugged out and it's pretty easy to avoid them. There's a lot of these little elevation changes around the entire arena that you can use to basically screw the AI over and make it not be able to target you super effectively. So definitely do that if you're in a pinch. And last but certainly not least, we have the Astraeos Bosses, starting with Natrix the Devious, which is Medusa. This is by far the hardest boss on this map. On screen now you can see the summon requirements for all 3 tiers of difficulty for Natrix. And now you can see on screen the level requirements for all 3 difficulties. Natrix summons Onyx, Titanoboa, and Aranio, so Megatheriums work really well for this fight due to them getting the insect killer buff. There's also water throughout the entire arena, which makes Spinos a really viable option. Shadow Mains would be good, but they're not in Ascended yet. In terms of abilities, Natrix has nothing crazy going on. There's nothing you need to look out for in particular, and there's nothing super dangerous. The real concern for this boss is the ridiculously high stats. In my opinion, with the absurd stats this thing has, the best choice by a mile is just running this fight with the Dinopithecus army and the Uranus. The reason the Dinopithecus army is my pick is because, simply put, Dinopithecus are the strongest statistical boss fighting creature Ark Ascended has to offer by a mile. There has never been a stronger statistical creature that has been available for boss fights in official Ark for so long. I have no idea how this hasn't been nerfed yet. It should have been nerfed multiple times. The Gigabyte's incredibly strong, the base stats are incredibly strong, and you can maul through this boss pretty quickly with the Uranus plus Dinopithecus army on any difficulty. The other reason I highly recommend Dinopithecus over something like, for example, a high stat Rex army for this boss is because all the weaknesses the Dinopithecus has, which is basically its slow movement speed and big hitbox, don't really matter for this boss at all. The boss is really big, so you can fit a ton of Dinopithecus around it. The boss is pretty slow, so your Dinopithecus can easily keep up with it. And if you're on a Uranus for this fight, just bring a bit of lesser antidote in case you get rabies from the bats. And there's basically no other threats in this boss fight at all. I should mention, you should bring lesser antidote for this fight regardless of what strategy you're using. You get rabies pretty much every time you fight it, because an Onyx is going to slip through at some point and just hit you. Another reason the Dinopithecus is so fantastic for this boss fight is because it's also the best choice for the Cyclops, which I'll talk about in a second, and the open world boss, which I'll talk about last. The fact of the matter is, it's the best choice in the game for 2 boss fights, both the arena boss fights on this map, and it's a top 3 choice for the open world boss fight. So I highly recommend just breeding up a really strong line of Dinopithecus and mauling all 3 bosses on this map. None of the bosses on Astraeos are strong against Dinopithecus, none of them are fast enough, none of them have abilities to punish the Dinopithecus' large hitbox and slow speed. It's just a field day for the Dinopithecus. Definitely try it out on Astraeos. Yet again, the Megatherium or the Spino are good choices for this boss too, but the Megatherium and the Spino are pretty much unusable for the other 2 boss fights unless you have insanely high mutations on them. So I wouldn't really waste the time on mutating those unless you plan on using different strategies for all the bosses. In the Spino's defense, the AI that I was talking about earlier where it chooses the wrong type of attack has been really improved in Ark Survival Ascended, so they are a lot better for bosses, but they're just not on the level of the Dinopithecus at all. Up next is the second arena boss fight, those the Widowmaker, which is the Cyclops. On screen now you can see the summon requirements and the level requirements for all 3 difficulties. I'm gonna give it to you straight here, this is a basic ass boss fight with nothing going on. There's no minis, there's no insane abilities at all. Literally any creature army with good enough stats and a Uranus torches this boss. The entire thing is a stat check. It has ridiculously high HP on all 3 difficulties, does a decent amount of damage, and moves around its completely flat arena pretty okay in terms of speed, but nothing crazy. Yet again, I just recommend bringing Dinopithecus, but you could also use Rexes, good Spinos, good Theres, good Dinotherium, or any other strong creature that you think can take on a high stat boss. There's literally nothing I can tell you about this boss. I'm trying my best to give you advice here. It's just, do you have enough stats to beat it? There's no abilities, there's no mini spawns, there's nothing going on with the arena. It just slams the floor with a club. It feels like a rushed boss they added just to have more content on the map. At least it's pretty easy. It's definitely not the easiest boss in the world because the stats are nuts, but it is not that bad. And last, but certainly not least, we have a boss I'm only going to try to pronounce the name of once, Caledonius and Eramanthian. This boss has 1 difficulty, is an open world boss. The summon for it is on this orbed statue under the Unbreakable Tree in Lemnocus at 3.7, 83.3, and on screen now you can see the summon requirements for this boss. This boss is basically 2 Daedon looking pigs that have about 1.3 million total HP. The stats are actually randomly generated, so this can have up to 1.7 million if you're unlucky like me, but regardless of the stats, it's not too bad to beat. Other stats like damage are also randomly generated, but they are also pretty strong. Since it's open world, Gigas, Karkas, Dreadnoughtus, or Dinopithecus are pretty much your best picks. I recommend just killing both of them with strong tames. There's no point trying to cheese these on foot as they only give loot drops an element. They don't provide any tech grams, so cheesing it really doesn't give you as much value as other boss fights. You can fly above them and shoot down, but it's just going to take you forever because they have so much HP. I recommend sending your army in to fight these and staying at a distance, either on a Uranus or just flying overhead. Staying out of the way and letting your creatures deal with these 2 is the best because they have some abilities that can damage you off your mount and some AoE abilities. The entire idea of these is one of them is kind of a fire pig and one of them is a poison pig, so you can connect the dots there. It's going to hurt you if you try to fight it yourself. But yeah, a couple Gigas, Dinopithecus, Karka, or a Dreadnoughtus are just going to stomp this boss entirely. And it gives some pretty good drops, so it's definitely worth doing. Whew, that's it. We made it, guys. We're done with the video. We finished all the bosses. Hopefully this video helped you out. If it did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below any other full guides you want. This has taken me almost a month to make, so I really hope it was helpful for you at some point. And if you enjoyed it, I made an entire video ranking the difficulties of all the main bosses in the game, which is linked on screen now. If you enjoyed this video, I guarantee you'll enjoy that one. So I'll see you there. Peace.